Good evening. When people talk about American power, they usually point to the obvious things: aircraft carriers crossing the oceans, stealth bombers in the sky, military bases scattered across the planet, alliances that stretch from NATO in Europe to security partnerships in Asia. Those things matter. They are real. They are visible symbols of strength, but they are not the deepest source of American power. The real foundation is something far less visible and far more powerful. It is the global financial system built around the US dollar. For decades, this system has quietly shaped the modern world. It has determined how energy is traded, how governments finance themselves, and how economic pressure can be applied without firing a single shot. Understanding that system reveals something important. The greatest challenge to American power may not come from a battlefield. It may come from a slow shift in the rules of the global economy. The moment everything changed. To understand this story, we have to go back to 1971. That was the year the United States ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. For decades after World War II, the international monetary system had been anchored to the Bretton Woods framework. The dollar was tied to gold and other currencies were tied to the dollar. When that link ended, the system lost its foundation. Suddenly, the most important currency in the world was backed not by gold, but by trust. And that created a dangerous question for Washington. Why should the rest of the world continue holding dollars? Why should global trade revolve around a currency that was no longer tied to a physical asset? The United States needed a new foundation for dollar dominance, and it found one in the most essential commodity of the industrial world: oil. The birth of the petrodollar. During the 1970s, the United States reached a strategic arrangement with Saudi Arabia, the world's most influential oil exporter. Under this system, oil would be priced and traded primarily in US dollars. This decision had enormous consequences. Oil powers the global economy. It fuels transportation, industry, shipping, aviation, and military logistics. Every modern economy depends on it. So if oil is priced in dollars, every country that needs energy must first obtain dollars. Germany needs dollars. Japan needs dollars. India needs dollars. China needs dollars. In effect, the dollar became the gateway currency of global energy trade. That meant global demand for dollars was built directly into the structure of the world economy. The recycling effect. The system did not stop there. Oil exporting countries accumulated vast amounts of dollars through energy sales, but those dollars rarely stayed idle. Instead, they flowed back into American financial markets. They were invested in U.S. Treasury bonds, banks, corporations, and real estate. This process became known as petrodollar recycling. And it strengthened American financial power dramatically because it meant the world was effectively helping finance the American economy. Countries bought energy in dollars and then reinvested those dollars in U.S. assets. This dynamic helped sustain the central position of the dollar and reinforced the influence of American financial institutions. Financial power as strategic power. But the dollar system is not just an economic arrangement, it is also geopolitical, because when global trade flows through dollar-based financial networks, the United States gains an extraordinary tool of influence. Access to the dollar system becomes a gateway to the global economy. Countries that lose that access can face enormous difficulties in conducting international trade. Bank transfers can be blocked, financial assets can be frozen, access to international markets can become restricted. In this way, financial systems can become instruments of geopolitical pressure. Over the past decades, such measures have been used in various forms against countries like Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and Cuba. The dollar, in this sense, functions not only as money, but as leverage. The search for alternatives. However, systems built on power often produce reactions. When countries see how financial networks can be used as tools of pressure, they begin exploring ways to reduce their dependence. Governments start asking difficult questions. What happens if our reserves are frozen? What happens if our banking system is cut off? Should our entire economic future depend on access to a single currency system? These concerns have encouraged some countries to experiment with alternative financial arrangements. This gradual process is often described as de-dollarization, a slowly changing system. Slowly changing. China has been particularly active in exploring these alternatives. As the world's largest energy importer, China has promoted the use of its currency in certain international transactions and expanded currency swap agreements with trading partners. Russia has increased trade settlements with some partners using currencies other than the dollar. Some energy exporters and importers have experimented with pricing mechanisms outside the traditional dollar system. Even long-standing partners of the United States have begun diversifying their economic relationships. None of these developments immediately replace the dollar, but they reflect a broader search for flexibility within the global financial system. Charles, what could change? If the role of the dollar in global trade gradually declines, the implications could be significant. Global demand for dollars might shift. Capital flows into American financial markets could evolve. Interest rates and borrowing conditions might respond to changes in global investment patterns. These changes would likely unfold gradually rather than suddenly. Large financial systems rarely transform overnight, but history shows that global economic orders can evolve when trade patterns, technologies, and political relationships change. Confidence and currency power. At the center of the international monetary system lies one crucial factor: confidence. Currencies dominate because markets trust them. The dollar's strength reflects decades of deep financial markets, legal stability, and global integration, but confidence can shift over time. As economic centers grow, as trade networks expand, and as new financial infrastructure develops, the balance of the global system can slowly adjust. These adjustments rarely happen dramatically. More often, they unfold quietly. The future of the system. Today, the dollar remains the world's dominant reserve currency. The United States still hosts the largest financial markets and maintains a central role in global trade and finance. But the global economy is constantly evolving. New economic powers are rising. New financial technologies are emerging. New trade patterns are forming. Understanding these developments is essential for understanding the geopolitics of the 21st century. The larger perspective. Which brings us back to the central point. Power in the modern world is not defined solely by military strength. It is also defined by control over financial systems, trade networks, and energy markets. For decades, the United States has stood at the center of that system. But global systems are never permanent. They evolve as economic realities change. Sometimes those changes are dramatic, but often the most important shifts happen quietly, through new partnerships, through new institutions, through new ways of conducting trade, and by the time those shifts become visible, the balance of power may already be changing.